Hello and welcome to the Athletic NBA Show. We're recording this Tuesday night, but it's coming out Wednesday. I'm Dave DeFore here with Mo DeKeel and Seth Partnow. So, of course, this is Nerder, She Wrote. We wanted to do a little bit of a live reaction because after 25 games of suspension, Ja Morant is back tonight, and he fixed all the Grizzlies' problems, guys. I don't know about you, but man, 1-0. They have a 1,000 winning percentage with Ja Morant plays this year. That's pretty good.
I mean you're undefeated. That's it. Champions. Crown them, Dave. Crown them.
You couldn't have scripted. You could not have scripted a better return for Ja Morant. He had 34 points, had 8 assists, had 6 rebounds, had a couple of steals, had some incredible plays, and had down the stretch just took over and had the game winner. I mean, this was a complete experience.
Game winner as you're going to see too.
Guarded by Herb Jones. This was not like a pushover that was out there guarding him on the perimeter either.
I mean, they let him kind of just like walk right into it, which was sort of surprising in that sense. Like, he kind of, they called the timeout and couldn't advance it, which is a whole different story. But okay, cool. It worked in their favor. Ja just dribbled the ball up the court, and they just let Herb Jones just kind of meet him. And Ja's too quick for that. And I think that's what kind of led to that being the relatively easy game winner that Seth's referring to. And, we know Herb Jones is a hell of a defender. And it was just like, I just think they did a poor job in terms of just sort of stressing the Grizzlies at all.
Yeah. Given the shooting or lack thereof kind of around, it is surprising that the space was that open for Ja. Like, I think that watching it back, it looked like you're kind of used to seeing teams shrink the floor a little better, especially against a guy who is a live wire ball handler. But that's more nitpicking, and obviously credit to Morant for making what is typically a very tough situation look pretty easy.
Yeah, and the thing is, he was kind of waltzing to the basket the whole fourth quarter.
Yeah, like it was just too easy in that sense, in the way he was able to drive and roll through everything. Kind of very Olay-esque defense to a degree from the Pelicans, from guys that we don't expect it defensively. Herb Jones, Daniels, like we expect them to have a little more fight and bite into their defense than they did tonight, and especially in the second half. Like in the first half, it was great. They held them scoreless for like 6 minutes or 4 minutes in the second quarter and built this huge lead. And then that just disappeared come the second half.
So watching Memphis in this game, I still think that obviously like one of the big things, and I think people have done a good job of bringing it up, is missing Steven Adams, missing Brandon Clark, missing that offensive rebounding. So I actually found it kind of funny that he scored his first point on an offensive rebound. I mean, this is like one of the things that their offense really depends on quite a bit. And they depend on the penetration that he was able to get in this game. I mean, the drive and kick game from Ja Morant is their half-court bread and butter, and they haven't really had that. So, I don't know if they can save this season, which, 26 games in, they're 7-19. I did some quick math. I think they've got to win at like a 51-win pace or something like that from here on out to get to 500. But does 500 get you in? Is that play in the West? I don't know.
It's probably there or thereabouts, but I think you're bringing up that it might be the Grizzlies with Morant are like there's some other teams like this where his importance to them because of the lack of other players who have a whole lot of creativity is almost magnified. I mean, they're last in offense on the season. They've been 2-7 heading into night in clutch games. And I think those things are related in the fact that, as you say, their half court offense, which has never been great, even with him, but at least maybe can stay afloat, has just completely lacked any sort of juice without him. And now maybe that puts some other people, Jaren Jackson especially, into perhaps more comfortable roles where they can, excel. And I don't think they're going to be a top offense the rest of the season, but even just them getting to their defense has been good enough that if they even get to an average offense, 50 win pace is not a ludicrous ask, even with the talent they have on the sidelines with the injuries to Adams and Brandon Clark.
Yeah, and one of the other things with Ja, I mean, he got to the free throw line. He put pressure on the rim, put pressure on the defense by drawing fouls. Sorry, Mo. Your Wi-Fi is just throwing me off here. It's go ahead.
Well, one, you didn't have to tell the audience that. Two, yeah, it is ludicrous.
Well, they're watching on
the
YouTube.
50 win pace at this point. That's fine, but like and the people who are listening to the podcast audience didn't need to know. Everybody else could have figured it out. But yeah, no, I think it is ludicrous, Seth, in the West. I think it's extremely difficult in the Western Conference to think that they're going to be able to go win 50 games. Like, okay, they beat a New Orleans team tonight. Like, a lot of the whole Western Conference is stacked. Like, I think this is one of those things. Like, I wasn't worried about Memphis with the Ja suspension until we saw the injuries to Steven Adams. And that's the big issue for them. And I think that's the real problem for this team. Like, I'm not saying they can't win win at a 50 win pace, but I'm just saying, like, still going to be pretty ludicrous if they do that. And considering in the Western Conference, in the East, yeah, there's a bunch of terrible teams. See, I almost cursed there and I was very proud of myself. There's a bunch of terrible teams in the Eastern Conference that they could beef up their schedule on. But like in this case, there's not a lot. And I think that's the in the West, I think that's a big ask.
So we were kind of kicking it around in the chat whether this Grizzlies team would be a candidate to buy, coming into the trade season, and whether they might take a swing. I don't think they will. I mean, we have said in previous weeks, we consider this a gap year. It's just when you get games like this, especially you see Ja Morant and how different that team looks when he's out there with them. You just hate to see, a team that we thought was on its way up have to take a gap year in the middle of what should be their competitive portion of this group, right?
But it's more than just the Ja stuff. Like, it's the injury to Clark that has him out for a year. It's the injury to Adams. Marcus Smart hasn't played in, I don't even remember the last time he was on the court. Like, it's a lot
I almost
of
forgot
stuff
he was on this team.
Yeah, no, I mean, seriously, that's the point, right? Like, it's more than just, I mean, yeah, the 25 games from Ja kills you. If he's playing all season, they're not 6-19 before tonight. And I think they're, they have a better record and they have a better chance of competing in the West, but they dug themselves a hole. It's going to be hard to dig themselves out of it, but it's not just all Ja. Like, all these injuries are killing them. And I think that's just a massive issue with that. And I think it's dangerous for them to send out good assets for trying to be the ninth place team in the Western Conference this year. When I think normal season next year, they're right back in the thick of things.
I mean, we did see, a couple play-in teams get pretty far last year. I mean, the Lakers made it to the conference finals. The Heat made it, to the finals. I mean, it's not like there's no value to being in the play-in mix if you're a good team, right? So, but it's more, I understand it's like pushing, this is a Sisyphean sort of task, right?
But it's like, okay, the Laker team with possibly the best NBA player ever or the second best, whatever your preference is. And Anthony Davis, who's not bad. And, in that sense, and then you have the Miami team that, like, let's just be honest, they were fortunate with the Giannis injury, and maybe they still beat him if Giannis doesn't get hurt, and misses a game or whatnot. And they won all the games that he played in and all that. We know that stuff. They played a Knicks team that was not quite ready to go to the conference finals. And, they just how tough that I just feel like when people say that, like, oh, a lottery, let's see it happen a couple more times before we're going to start saying this is a normal thing. I think last year was more of an outlier. And I think this year,
the Lakers
it'll probably be more chalk.
Yeah, the Lakers completely retooling at the trade deadline, like, honestly. And then LeBron was injured in the lead up to the playoffs. They probably get themselves out of that play-in if they're healthy. So,
and I think just to put a button on this, like, the Lakers maybe knew what they had and what they didn't have with their key guys yet. And I think if we see, Jaren Jackson start to get back to defensive player of the year form, if we see a couple of the young guys now that there's someone to maybe set them up, start to develop into what look like real playoff ready pieces, then maybe in addition to them going on a winning streak, I think that's as much, both things have to happen, is they have to look like the guys they have available next to Ja look good enough and thereabouts from a record standpoint. And I think that both of those things happening is certainly more likely to not happen than it is by a significant margin.
We don't often get to do these sort of, I mean, it's not even real gamer, but it's a little bit of a gamer. You guys have any Pelicans thoughts from this game? I know Zion was questionable with some flu-like symptoms before this game, so that could explain some of the lackadaisical defense out there.
Okay, what about the other games?
Okay.
So just a big,
what does
hanging curveball.
Like, no, I'm just tired of this stuff, man. Like, listen, I'm going to go on a rant here. So everybody brace yourselves and hopefully the Wi-Fi holds up. But, I tweet out a clip of Zion getting cooked by Ja and the Pelican fans, the defenders of Ja and that's right, coming after the evil Mo because Zion had 2 fouls. So he didn't try hard that play. Cool. What about all the other plays? What about all the other games that we've seen him not try hard? Like, honestly, when are we going to stop making excuses for him? It's this, it's that, it's this, it's that. Like, at this point, if he's not going to try hard on defense, he's not going to try hard on defense. I'm going to point it out when I see it. And it's simple as that. And there's not much changing with that. It's frustrating to watch. The kid has talent. He tried hard defensively last year. We saw a piece of it where it looked good. And it's just a matter of him not doing it. And okay, it's fouls. It's okay. He's sick. Okay, it's this, it's that. It's how many more excuses are we going to give this guy for not trying on the other end of the court? And a lot of times he looks lackadaisical on the offensive end this season. It's been a lot of weird vibes from him all season. He's made weird comments in post-game press conferences. Just at the end of the day, I throw my hands up with Zion. I just don't know what to do or what to say anymore.
Yeah, I mean, it's a shame because, as a defensive prospect, he came into the league and we had high hopes. And the run that this team went on in the second quarter was spurred by defense. Herb Jones and Dyson Daniels were smothering on the perimeter in the second quarter. And so you could see, if Zion was just, let's say, defending at a league average for his position level, right? League average, not even I'm not saying he needs to be this all NBA defender, but if he's league average, the Pels are just better. They're just better. And I know everyone, they want to focus on the offensive end because, again, this is what gets people paid and this is what makes highlights. But Seth, at some point, you've got to do it on both ends if you want to be a real star.
And it's also it's I think the word that underpins a lot of what Mo is talking about is consistency. And there's a lot of players who on a given night can look great and but give some good defensive plays and so on and so forth. But it's the difference between the guys who are pretty good and the guys who are really driving, winning at an elite level is the night to night consistency. And that I think that's a criticism we can level a little bit at kind of both stars on the Pelicans, if we're honest. Brandon Ingram was very good tonight, but it's not every night. He's across the season. It's almost, you don't want to hang too much on it because it's the narrative in his first game back, but there's something almost fitting about 2 almost guys and then Morant showing what the guy looks like. And that's horribly reductive, but it might not be wrong.
I mean, but we know it's true. This happens all the time. The best player in a playoff series actually matters in basketball. It does matter. And so having the best player in any possession or a game or whatever matters. And Ja was down the stretch. I mean, he was the best player on the floor, hands down, just unstoppable.
Not even close.
I mean,
not even close.
Yeah. Yeah. and it has to be demoralizing. So anyway, that was a fun game, and it's way more fun to have Ja back and playing, because now hopefully the Grizzlies can be watchable. I mean,
they will be like you saw it right away with Ja, just the way he's getting to the rim and sliding in the way, like, to be honest, it didn't look that rusty. I mean, granted, it's the first game, and I think there's a lot of bounce with adrenaline and things like that. It might take him a little while, but like they'll be fun to watch for sure. Like, there's no question. I think you guys said it. Jaren Jackson Jr. gets to slide into his spot. Desmond Bane gets to slide in to his normal position. Like, I think there's a lot of that stuff too that's going to help them. I just think they've going 6-19 in those 25 games. That killed you. If you got to 10 wins, that would have been a win for them. But those 4, and when you just look at it, the fact of like before tonight, they were 6.5 games behind Golden State, and Golden State's 11th. Like, that says a lot. Like, that's the challenge there. And I think it's going to be really difficult for them.
Yeah. And also maybe they could have used Dylan Brooks this year. Moving on, I thought it was a good time to check in.
Drop that one and run away. Not giving me a chance to respond, but go ahead.
I'm taking advantage of Mo's Wi-Fi. We like to play a little game around the Athletic NBA show sometimes called the Panic Meter. I'm going to sound the panic meter. You guys let me know where you are on a scale of 1 to 10 on the panic meter with these teams. And this is a rough one to start with, because we do like, this team has been sort of a podcast pet, I would say. The Cleveland Cavaliers are having a rough one. Evan Mobley and Darius Garland both going to be out for at least like the next 6 to 8 weeks. And it's compounding. Like, it's at the exact same time. It's been a rough season for them. Are we looking at another team dealing with a gap here?
I think on top of that, we also have to mention that Jared Allen is having a significantly less of an impact this year than he did a year ago. And I don't know if that's, hangover from the playoffs, if that's, Mobley trying to do a little more before he got injured or what have you, but he hasn't been quite as impactful this year, really on either end of the court, as he has been in the past. And I think, there were a team of that had 4 guys and then weren't sure what. I think they did a good job adding the fifth guy. Like, Max Strus has given them what they needed in that spot. It's just, other than Donovan Mitchell, like, the other 3, some through no fault of their own, haven't really hit the heights that they thought they could.
One, it's still weird, Seth doing a ghost story podcast there with the little campfire deal. You guys want to make fun of my Wi-Fi?
He's got some very like suspect romantic lighting.
All right,
it's the dinner service.
I don't know what's going on there. It's so incredibly awkward. The other thing, this is why we're not allowed to record at night. It says I'm audio only now. What happened?
He's okay. He's okay. We'll just keep it going.
The other thing for the Cavs, though, is I think they're just in a weird position now where I think they have to decide Garland or Mitchell. They got to decide Allen or Mobley. I think we've seen enough, at least I have, in the sense of like, those guys can't play together. And it's very difficult. I think the easy one to see is Mobley and Allen in the sense of the floor spacing and whatnot. I think, there's a lot of issues in that stuff. I think they need to kind of figure out which one of those 2 guys they like. And I think we can guess which one. And then I think on the other end, I know it sounds weird when you say like Garland and Mitchell can't play together. It's hard. I know they got to the playoffs last year, but you saw it really in the playoffs. The offense ran so much more smoothly when the ball was in Darius Garland's hands, and everybody just stood and watched when it was Donovan Mitchell's hands. And I think that's kind of the issue for this team. And the organization has a big decision to make, especially with Mitchell's free agency coming up next offseason. I think they got to start figuring out what they want to do and chart a course forward with that. I think that's really going to be the challenge for them. I think it's been a very disappointing start to the season. And, and now the injury bugs hit them, where I think you're right, Dave. And I think it's probably sucks that for them to have like a gap year, but they're going to be in some kind of quasi gap year sort of situation.
Although I would say, look, there are worse positions to be in. I'm with you. I think Garland and Mobley are the future there. And I think that's how you have to gear up. But you have Donovan Mitchell, and he is a hugely valuable player and could potentially, if you find the right dance partner, you might be able to solve some of the holes that you've got. I mean, this team has for years needed a 3-and-D wing. It's needed like a 2-guard. You've got Max Strus, as you guys talked about, and he's sort of a perfect fit. I've been envisioning scenarios where they could somehow get Cam Johnson from Brooklyn for Mitchell and maybe some other stuff. And it
Maybe
solves a lot of their roster fits, right? Like you add that 3-and-D guy and all of a sudden it does open things up a little bit more, but so much of it is dependent on what Mobley can develop as a 5. Because, Jared Allen is needed until Mobley can be your full-time 5. I mean, that's just that's the story. But do you feel like have you seen enough to feel like you'd be willing to bet he's ready next season?
No.
I think but it doesn't matter.
Right.
I think that's the thing.
Okay.
You have to put him in at some point. Like, the whole thing with Chet right off the gate has started at center. Right. And now you're seeing the Spurs now shifting and putting Wembanyama finally at center. These are the positions they're going to be. If that's the position you're going to be, let's stop delaying the development and put them in those positions. And I think that's kind of the scenario you got to kind of start looking at and start playing him at that. I think it was, look, you tried the Twin Towers thing. It didn't work, right? You're not able to spread the floor. The paint's congested, all that stuff. And even with Mobley's passing ability, it just hasn't seemed to click with those guys. So now you got to move him to the position he's going to end up playing anyways and start developing him there and get him reps at that position. I think that's the most important thing for them. And I think from there that he can grow into that position. Man, Chet Holmgren wasn't ready. He's just put in the position and now he's doing it. Nobody's ever ready as a rookie or a second-year guy or third-year guy.
I thought you were talking about becoming a parent.
I mean, it's
nobody
becoming a center in the NBA, becoming a parent, basically the same thing.
Same thing.
Panic meter wise, I think I'm at like a 5 here. It's more of a, hey, this stinks, but it's circumstantial. This is not like a failure. And again, they've got very good pieces. This is not a team that's going to be bad anytime soon.
I think the lingering panic bell is, I think, the speculation about whether Donovan Mitchell would want to stay there has been I think that started 5 minutes after he got traded there.
Pretty much.
Right. And frankly, I kind of agree with the sentiment you guys are saying. And in a similar way you're talking about, Mo, moving him might be best because I think that while it made them a better team last year, they didn't really get to see what Mobley could develop as an offensive player by bringing in a guy who has so much of the ball and such a high creative burden as Mitchell. So he didn't get a chance to learn and make some of the mistakes that need to happen to see if he can become more than like a more of an offensive cog, move towards maybe even if it's just like a Bam Adebayo type offensive player where he's not necessarily like a scoring hub, but a guy who you can make a central part of your offense. So they haven't really had a chance to experiment with that almost.
All you got for?
We should also. Yeah, I think the other the thing with the Cavs, we should also kind of mention they are the 6th seed right now in the East. We'll see how it plays out and everything. Like they could very well be a playoff team, and we could all still be going like, doesn't feel like it did last year. Like last year was the feel good story. I feel like this year was a regression with everything that's kind of happened to them. So like I know we're pouring water on them now. It's not doom and gloom. So I'll go 4 with the panic meter, but like I'm more just kind of concerned about how are they going to try to develop these guys and what are I feel like they need to stop kicking the can and start making a decision.
Yeah. Oh, it's Seth. You look like
I was just they're a half game behind the Knicks who are in 5th, but I mean, I think we would all agree. We feel like much better about the Knicks as, maybe the Knicks aren't a championship caliber team, but they're a solid playoff team.
Yeah, their floor is pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think we we would probably draw a line under the Knicks in the standings and say, these are the teams we feel good about. And below that are the teams we feel, below that are teams we're going to talk about most of.
Yeah, pretty much.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
below the Knicks line. All right, let's move on to the next team. The Atlanta Hawks are 11-15 as we record this. It's tied for the last play-in spot. This is not this is not where this team expected to be. I mean, this team made it conference finals a couple years ago, and it was definitely a fluke. We can call it a fluke, but basketball can be a fluky sport. Quinn Snyder had a full, off season, had training camp. This team just isn't really that good, I think, is the biggest problem. What do you guys think?
I mean, their internal development has stalled.
That's it. That's it.
No,
that's how you describe the Hawks. No. That's everybody. I'm not trying to kill you. That's everybody. Like,
yeah. No, but think of the players on that team that there were some like high hopes internal development. Like DeAndre Hunter has plateaued and perhaps regressed since his in the last couple of years. They maybe made the wrong choice between him and Herter for that wing spot. Capella is fine, but he's blocking Okongwu, and Okongwu hasn't really developed in quite the way you would think. Well, he clearly should. I think we've wanted to see him surpass Capella, but has he? I don't know. You've got the same weird backcourt dynamic in Atlanta, just with not as good players. I mean, I think Donovan Mitchell's a better player than Trae Young, and Darius Garland is slightly, but I think he's a better player than DeJounte Murray. But it's similar dynamic. And yeah, it's just, the bright spot for them this year is Jalen Johnson.
I mean, that's the hard part, right? Like, that's the thing with the team. Like, you're like, Jalen Johnson is the bright spot. How many people knew who Jalen Johnson was coming into the league, like coming into the season? We're ready to kind of jump on that bandwagon. I think there's a lot of things with it where I'm disappointed in a lot of things. Disappointed, I thought after Quinn Snyder would have a full offseason and a training camp. Not really impressed with that all that much. The Trae and DeJounte Murray dynamic just hasn't worked. And we could, for whatever, a million reasons, it's just not come together in that way. And this was one of those things where, like, that's not where I wanted DeJounte to go. I didn't think that was a good landing spot for him. And I feel like we all just thought, like, okay, whatever, it should just fit fine. And it hasn't worked out because it requires Trae to give up the ball more often than not. And I don't know if that's something he wants to do. He's been better at it this year to a degree, but still, the whole thing is just flux, and it's just bad decisions. You talked about it, Seth, giving up on Herter for DeAndre Hunter and then not being able to develop Hunter says a lot. We're not sure if Okongwu can surpass Capella. And probably the only way they'll ever find out is if they trade Capella, and then they have to hope they were right. Because if they're wrong, and now they're in even worse position. And like, that's kind of the scary proposition there. I just think the organization itself has a whole lot of stuff they got to look at in terms of how they operate from the top on down. And I think there's a lot of things there. And it's just kind of, they're just blah. Like, I made fun of you for the sounds you made before you start, but that's honestly my feelings about, like, okay, let me turn on the Hawks.
Let me turn on the Hawks.
It's just like,
it's
nothing.
a morass, right? It's not, it's not tough. Detroit, because it's not embarrassing. This is not, they haven't lost 20 some odd games in a row. They're just like a run of the mill bad team. I think, like, there comes a point, and I will give Trae Young credit. Trae Young has played more defense this season than in every other season he has played organized basketball combined. More defense,
low bar
possessions, full possessions than he's ever played in his life. But he's still not, like, he's never going to be an average defender ever. Even if the effort is there every single night, he just isn't going to have the body for that. He's not going to have the size. I mean, we've talked about this sort of archetype, and his value has to come, 80-85% on the offensive end, right? You just hope that he doesn't give up too much defensively, that the offense is all worth it. But the DeJounte thing, I mean, I really did think that would work. I know you didn't like it, Mo. I didn't like it necessarily for him as a piece, but I thought it would sort of solve your Trae Young problem. You add another playmaker. He can really defend. He rebounds his position exceptionally well. But I think it's just it's like a domino effect of the failures on the wing and, finding that adequate four.
I mean, I think it's listeners to this pod will know I've never been the biggest Trae Young guy, but they're fourth in offense, and that's so Trae's kind of done his job, and yeah, he's not great defensively, but with the rest of the talent on their roster, starting with Murray and Capella, and Hunter is supposed to be a defensive wing, like they're 27th in defense, and that's not all on Trae, and so it's getting back to the blah, like the rest of the roster is, I guess, just kind of blah. And they've got a star and a blah roster. And in today's NBA, that's what it gets you.
Yeah. So I'm at like
defend one person on that roster. Hold on. I'm only going to defend one person on that roster. Bogdan Bogdanović is not blah. And how dare you, Seth, call him blah? Okay. How dare you, sir? That is offensive and wrong. Okay, he is not blah. He needs to be free and needs to be on a team where he can let it go. If there's one guy, you've been all over the John Collins needs to be traded thing for years. Well, you are on the wrong guy, because John Collins got to Utah and he hasn't done very much. Free Bogdanović. By the way, both of them. We'll talk about the other one in a second. But free both Bogdanovićes, please.
All right, I've got them at like a 6 or a 7. They've been here for a while, right? Like this is a team that they needed. I think it's time for some changes, maybe wholesale. I want to speed us up a little bit because we're dragging on. We're hammering these guys too bad. The Phoenix Suns. This is actually a good team. 10. Look, Bradley Beal. This injury stuff is an issue, right? Like, and it's not just about Bradley Beal. It's about Kevin Durant and Devin Booker too. The workload on those guys, I think, is just too high. This was an issue that we thought they might run into this season. Lack of depth for the Suns. Like, we know that's important, especially in a long regular season. They don't really have any great defenders. I think Nurk has been up and down, but mostly decent this season. I don't know if it helps them in the playoffs, but I'm really, really worried about the Suns because of the Beal situation.
So I got a question to ask you guys off of that. With the Beal situation, Booker's missed games. KD's been the healthiest of them all. How many games do they need to have together for you to feel comfortable with this? Like, what do you need to see? We're at 25 right now, I think, for the Suns. And like, how many games do you need to see the three of them all together? They've only played, I think, about 24 minutes together. What do you guys? How many do you need to see where you can go, okay, this is something I'm now confident in?
Well, this is kind of what we've dealt with the Clippers for the last few years, where their health has waxed and waned, and it seems like their stars were never healthy at the same time, and they get to the playoffs and they play like a bunch of strangers. Seth, I don't know. Is chemistry and familiarity important in the sport of basketball come playoff time?
Perhaps. I mean, I don't even know that it's not even just the comfort with each other. Like, I think we had questions over whether this trio is actually, like, it's going to sound weird given the caliber of all three players, but is it actually good? And like, I would need 30 games of it being good and not just, being two guys going off and Bradley Beal being the highest paid, place kicker in history, essentially, and have it be effective and win games. I would need to see about 6 weeks of that to feel good about this team, because I didn't coming into the season. I think none of us were particularly happy with that trade. And I think that, they haven't had a chance to prove it, but they haven't proven it. And also everyone, the guys are hurt. The load you've talked about on Booker and Durant has them 10th in the West.
Mo, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm terrified. I've been worried about them. I mean, you talk about Nurkic being up and down. I'm telling you, he's a playoff problem. Whenever I see guards go at him in the pick and roll, it's for the most part rough, from what I've seen. And I think there's a lot of like Chris Paul blew by him in a game. Chris Paul, old ass Chris Paul, and I love Chris, but still, man, like that shouldn't happen. And I think there's a lot of stuff with what we're watching with them, and I think there's a lot of difficulty for them. And I just worry they got a lot to figure out once they get those three guys healthy. Who's the fifth starter? What's the rotations, and who can play with who and whatnot. Like, I don't know, Seth, if 30 games is enough. I almost feel like the boat has sailed in terms of them having enough time to figure it out. Like, I felt like they kind of needed the whole season. And it's, by the time they're talking about Beal, like early January, mid-January, what's that, another 3 weeks? Like, you're in trouble. And that's a real issue with those things. And I think that's a concern for them, where my panic meter is 11, Dave. I know most meters go to 10, but mine goes to 11.
I'm gonna ask a question here that I think illustrates why the panic is so high. Based on what you just said, Mo, this is I'm surprised I'm asking it, but if it was announced tomorrow that Beal was out for the season, would they be in better shape than they are with the limbo of not really knowing?
It's a good question.
The fact that it's even a question, I think, illustrates where we are.
I know what you're saying, like that.
Yeah.
That limbo kind of is important, but I just think also the talent deficit's so hard because I don't know if they have a way to get anything else to turn. Okay, we don't have Beal for the season. All right, time to start dealing and making sure we get the pieces we need.
Yeah,
they're in a tough
spot. It's kind of the opposite.
Way, so I almost think like it's difficult.
In some ways, it's opposite of like the way I look at Cleveland. Like Cleveland, okay, 2 good players are out, but you still have this guy who's an asset that you can maybe trade and get more stuff. Whereas with Phoenix, the guy who's out would be the guy that you would maybe shop around, if it wasn't working out. You're not shopping around Kevin Durant. You're definitely not shopping around Devin Booker, right? I think that
no trade clause, you're kind of screwed.
Yeah. Fitting. Oh my God. I completely forgot. In the heat of the moment, that Bradley Beal has a no trade clause. I totally forgot. Oh man. Yeah. Well, I mean, listen, I'm sure he likes Phoenix. It's it's great weather there in the winter. Man, yeah. I might be pretty high up there. I think I'm a good 9 or 10. Next up, the Toronto Raptors. They are the NBA's most confused team that is so clearly not good and should just completely reboot. And they've kind of been in this situation for years. This year, right now, as we're recording, they are tied with the Atlanta Hawks for that last play-in spot, 11 and 15. Fitting. It does, doesn't it?
Because I think I'm going to make a similar sound about the Raptors that I did.
They're Atlanta North.
I mean, they're doing it completely differently, but it's like, there's some talent there, but it doesn't really fit, and they don't have enough creation, and how good is it's almost like they're a weird amalgam of Atlanta and Cleveland. In that, the biggest question for them is, what is Scotty Barnes, and do we know?
I'm waiting for Mo to answer that one.
Scotty Barnes is a player.
Yeah.
I think he's a player. I think he's a guy that I don't know if I don't think he's a number one. I think he's more of a Robin than a Batman in that instance, but I think he'd be a really good Robin. But I think the problem for them is this is a team that's Atlanta North is a great way to put it, Dave. Like, this is a team that, again, kicks the can down the line, and down the road. Like, they screwed up last year. Not getting anything for Fred VanVleet. Huge problem. You let him walk away for nothing in free agency. Now you're in the same position with OG Anunoby and Pascal Siakam. I don't imagine the market's as high now as it was for OG last year. I could be way wrong and watch him go for like 1 million picks tomorrow. But I think you have a lot of guys like you should have made some moves. You should have made those hard decisions last year. And now I just wonder if they have the stomach to make those decisions this year. And if they're going to lose guys again for nothing. I think they're in a really weird spot. Again, it's funny. A lot of these teams we're talking about, to me, my issues are more management and how they're kind of like dealing with these guys and building a roster and preparing this team sort of moving forward. And I think that's kind of the issues with Toronto. They don't want to pick a lane.
Yeah. With Toronto, funny. For sure.
No, it's funny with Toronto because they built the championship team by making hard. Okay, well, we have the coach of the year, but he's not good enough in the playoffs, so we're gonna move on and hire a first time coach. We're gonna take a swing on Kawhi Leonard, going into his free agent year and trade kind of a franchise icon for him. Then once they got there, it's like, okay, we're not quite good enough. Let's now trade for Marc Gasol. And that's how they built the team to win the title. And then since then, it's like you say, Mo, that's just sort of by not making decisions, they're having decisions made for them.
Yeah. Plain and simple.
I mean, they have to be hoping that like Indiana is going to say, we want to get OG now instead of waiting until the summer, or Pascal Siakam. Like they got to be hoping for that in the next couple of months. Cause I mean, like let's just throw a hypothetical. Let's say you're the Pacers and you're thinking, hey, I might be interested in this guy. You could get him now with bird rights, and that's the good move. But we saw last year, we thought that might happen with Van Vliet, and Toronto just had no interest whatsoever. They're definitely not going to do that again, right?
It's not about no interest whatsoever. The problems from what we hear about dealing with Toronto is Masai will take you all the way to just you're one yes away from the deal being done and then deciding I'm not doing it. And I think that's like as another organization, how do you deal with that? Like in a trade discussions, like that's brutal. And I think that's one of those things there. And I'm with you, Dave. They can't do it again, but I'm not convinced they won't. Like it's in my honest opinion, like I'm not confident, that they won't do it again because they just did it and it was dumb.
My panic meter doesn't even register all that high for the Raptors because we've been sitting here for a while. I mean, you can't actually slowly boil a frog because slowly boiling it actually will jump out. You need to flash boil the frog, but I've been slowly boiled by the Raptors because they've just kind of been this for a while. The phrase is wrong. I'm sorry. I need to correct it before I use it. We don't podcast at night very often. It's been a long day.
And there's a reason why.
All right, let's move to the last team on our panic meter list.
Can we actually take two teams together?
We can do two. Spot? Yeah, I was gonna skip the Washington Wizards.
The Detroit Wizards or the Washington Pistons.
Well, the thing about the Wizards is I reconsidered them after adding them to the list because I wouldn't call them panicking. They're just bad, awful, and they're in the beginning stages of a complete teardown, and they're going to move and maybe they rebrand. I mean, this is going to be like, a franchise overhaul like we maybe have never seen before. It just, who knows? And also I think that the group running them, just the track record that they have with OKC, with the Clippers. I mean, we at least need to give them a little bit of time. Yes, they have some very unserious things happening. Jordan Poole every single night. But I mean, what are you going to do? You got to put guys out there, right? You got to get to that salary floor.
When you put it that way and you remember that this is paying the medicine, this is the medicine for not making decisions for years and years with Beal. And now it's, and as you say, a new group has come in. And so I think you're right.
I mean, there's an argument to be made that this could be the executive group of the year because they got off the Bradley Beal no trade clause contract as early as they did.
The only thing I got to say about Washington is pay attention, Toronto. When you keep kicking the can, this is the kind of stuff that happens. Just saying.
Yep. That's a great point. Okay, so the other team was the Detroit Pistons, which your panic meter is probably broken with, because I mean, it's hapless.
It's one thing about it is because there's no expectations, right? There were low expectations for this team. If you had a high expectation for them, it was possibly play in tournament. Like, it was along those lines with that. But I think I think what we're really seeing when we're watching the Detroit Pistons is this is why you don't hire a coach that's turned you down multiple times when you kept raising the price. When you kept offering more money and he kept saying no. You don't keep offering him more money till he says yes, because clearly he did not want this job. It was pretty well documented before they hired him that he wasn't that interested in it. It just got to the point where they offered him so much money he couldn't turn it down. Now, that's the first problem, right? And that starts with management in the front office. The other thing with management in the front office, can you stop freaking drafting centers? Constantly looking to get a new center it just feels like you have just an abundance of centers. I feel like in this next trade cycle, they're going to get 2 more. It's just kind of ridiculous at this point. And it's not like they found any I like Duran, Isaiah Stewart's fine, but like, it's not, wow, we've really knocked it out of the park with these.
There's no Embiid.
You just sort of haven't really killed it in that regard. So like, management has really kind of killed themselves there. But then also back to Monty Williams. I get you're trying to change the culture. I get you're trying to make certain things matter. You also got to play your young guys. You got to develop them, because that's the only way this team's going to get out of it. And for it had been such a hard struggle for Jaden Ivey to get actual minutes and for Marcus Saucer to get actual minutes, over Killian Hayes. Like, is kind of ridiculous. We all know what Killian Hayes at this point is. He ain't an NBA player, not a starter at the very least. And I think that's a lot of the stuff you start there. And this has been a categorical failure from the top down. And again, it all started in the summertime when they just kept asking Monty to coach this team, and he kept saying no. Like, listen, at a certain point, you have to just realize he's not that into you.
What's the plan?
Wow. Hey,
what's
Seth,
the plan here?
You know what they say? Every man has a price.
Yeah.
If you go high enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. What is the plan, Seth? I mean, I will say this. I think you draft Cade Cunningham, and if Cade Cunningham is this generational talent, we maybe are having a different conversation. But Cade doesn't look like that guy to me.
Even if he is, they're still really bad. Like
they're awful.
Like them being this terrible suggests or almost proves that he's not that. But even if he was, who else is a starting? Who else looks like a starting level NBA player on this team? And Mo, I know you've already said one name, and on the twilight of his career, we probably would like to get Bojan to a place where he can provide some juice as in the last days of his useful NBA
free the Bogdanoviches.
Yeah.
Where do we want to send Bojan? Do you guys have a home for Bojan?
I have a home for him. I don't know if it's realistic in any way, shape, or form, but I'd like to see him on the Lakers.
Ooh, I was going to go to LA too, but the other one.
Yeah, no, that other team, don't mess with it. They got something good going. Seth's back at the campfire lighting now. They got a good thing going at the other place. Don't mess with it. The Lakers need to punch up their offense in the half court. I think he helps them there, and I don't think he would take down their defense that much. He'll hurt it a little bit, but not to the point where it would really be an issue. I just don't know how they get him.
I think that's just a massive upgrade on the Taurean Prince spot. I don't think it's a downgrade in defensively there at all. I think that's just a pure win if they were able to make that work somehow.
Yeah, maybe the Warriors can steal him. They could use some help if they're actually going to try to win.
But it won't matter, because the Pistons are going to overvalue him and demand that they get 3 first-round picks for Bojan Bogdanovic.
They're
completely guessing, by the way.
They're sunk. You guys got anything else before we wrap up this week?
Happy holidays, everyone.
Annoyed enough fan bases today.
That's all I do. Let me set up this thing so everyone can think that we just hate every team. That's half my job. Merry Christmas, happy holidays, and I'm not sure we'll be back before the New Year. So happy New Year to you guys. We're gonna have a holiday special next week, so you'll hear our voice, but we won't be live. For Seth Partnow and Mo Dakhil, I'm Dave DeFord, and this has been Nerder, She Wrote, on the Athletic NBA Show.